dwell in a house among his people. But now he has a home that's better than the first. It doesn't look like a building with a steeple. Now he's living in the people of the church. Brick after brick, God is building his temple. Brick after brick, he's making it strong. With Christ the sure foundation and his people as the stones, he is building a place he can live. Brick after brick.
Well, good morning, church. Good morning. And for those who are joining us over the internet this morning, you may note that I may be appearing a little lower in stature, and that is because I am seated on a stool. And I'm seated because just several days ago, I had surgery, and I had a hip replacement surgery. And thank God I am back, and reportedly everything went well. But I wanted to take this opportunity to thank so many people that have responded with their kindness throughout this week. I've received so many shout outs and well wishes from people that far beyond this congregation, people that I haven't heard from in a long, long time, wishing me well. And they just really did my heart very glad. And I was just truly blessed. Many of you have been sending over little quick meals and chicken wings, and I got lemon cakes and lemon cookies and just all kinds of things. And I have been advised that should continue for the weeks to come in order to bring about a full recovery. Of course, I want to thank Pastor Ken, who faithfully is always able to step in for me and cover me on things such as this. So I thank him for his faithfulness, as well as Andrea, his wife, who supports him as well. I want to thank all those who have just chipped in and kicked in. Of course, Darlene, who just does so much, and I'm so blessed to be able to count on her. She just makes sure that things are running smoothly behind the scenes, and she puts in a lot of work, and I become very dependent upon her, and I have not been disappointed. So big shout out to Darlene as well. And of course to my wife, who's just been amazing in all of that she has done for me and does for me. So I am truly thankful. I am blessed to have the people in my life that have shown me love and kindness and concern. So I thank you all. Well, it is Father's Day, and I wanted so much to be here to share Father's Day thoughts with you. If we go to the Word of God this morning, I won't be long, but I do want to share some ideas, some thoughts with you concerning fathers. I want to do something a little different. I want to just open up and share a little of my background, my story with my father, and how it has manifested and shown itself in the life of my son that I am blessed to have in my life. If we go to the Word of God and the Gospel of John, the 14th chapter, reading from the New International Version. Just reading a couple of verses. from verse 8. Philip said, Lord, show us the Father, and that will be enough for us. Jesus answered, don't you know me, Philip? Even after I've been among you such a long time, anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? And I want to take my subject from that poignant question, Lord, show us the Father. Show us the Father. As I said, I want to share some of my background, some of my story. And I know we all have our unique stories. You may relate to some of my story, and my story may be very different from yours. I was raised in a family with two younger sisters, Karen and Jolene. Karen would pass away early in her 30s, but we grew up together in childhood. And my parents were in an interracial marriage. My mother was white, my father was black. And that brought its own set of circumstances and complications, especially back in my day when interracial marriages were actually illegal in our country. But aside from that, my memories are that of somewhat of a normal, traditional family setting. I remember our families, mother and father and my sisters, going to theaters, watching movies, spending days at the park and the zoo. I remember plenty of trips to the circus. And for the most part, I had that traditional family story. A mother and a father, two sisters, just going through our lives. And it was shortly after I turned 9 years old. For those who may not be aware, my birthday is in October. And shortly after that, our life would make a dramatic, irreversible turn. Because it was then that we had a fire in our apartment. And the fire destroyed everything, rendering us homeless, having to live for weeks and perhaps months with neighbors. And if that wasn't bad enough, this fire took place over our Christmas vacation, during the Christmas time, where the very presents that we received that year were destroyed. I remember some very specific things about that fire and that time. That was the first Christmas I ever received. I ever got a bicycle. For a 9-year-old kid, that was a big deal. I had a bicycle that never made it outside, and that was destroyed. We lost everything. So one of the worst things that could have happened, and it happened at a very poignant time in our lives during Christmas. And it was at that time, as if all of that wasn't bad enough, that my father ended up abandoning us leaving his family. He started coming home later, skipping nights out, until eventually he didn't come home at all. And so now I am being raised by a single mom, and all that brings to a family. My dad wasn't there to support us financially or in any way. We had to go on welfare. And back in my day, this was before the distribution of food stamps and Visa cards. You had to stand in a public line and be handed out cheese and milk and meat for your family. It was humiliating. It was confusing. And it just added to the emotional trauma and turmoil that I was dealing with as a 9-year-old boy. Now, with my family, we were a far cry from the Cosby kids. I want to be careful because my younger sister, Jolynn, who supports this church and listens to these messages every week. So I want to be careful what I say when I express that we did not get along. There was not a, I love you, do you want to play a game? We had a lot of, get out of my room and don't touch my stuff. But I'm much better now. So I didn't get along with my sisters. We were managing and dealing. So I took to the streets, and in New York City, in Brooklyn, it was a very congested environment. Everyone knows that New York is a very crowded city. And in my time and where I lived, it was not a very pleasant environment. There was always trouble, fighting, crime going on in the city. And this is where I started hanging out shortly after 9 years old. I got into my share of trouble. Graffiti was a big thing back then, and I did my part in decorating our neighborhoods. And when I look back, I myself am amazed at some of the things that I did, got away with, some of the things that we did in our neighborhood that were not only stupid, but tremendously dangerous. We were known for riding on the back of buses in traffic. In New York City, we spent a lot of times up on the rooftops where average buildings were 4, 5, 6 stories tall. And if you could believe it, I remember jumping over the rooftops, the narrow alleyways, and it was sport for us to just leap from rooftop to rooftop, 4 stories up. Now, in New York City, they had a subway system. This is a subway map, which was very difficult for us to read, but just to give you some kind of a bearings of what our environment was. If you look at a subway map, I lived in a section over by what's known as Prospect Park. My high school was 10 miles away in Upper Manhattan. Central Park, which we're all familiar with, was about 12 miles away from where I lived. Coney Island, which everybody is familiar with, was about 8 miles away. And there was another thing like Coney Island. It was Rockaway Playland. That was 15 miles away. If we were to venture up into the Bronx, that was a good 20 miles away. Now, in the subway systems there, back then in my day, you could literally ride the subways all day long, all night long, if you wanted. It was very common for us to just cut school and live in the subways, ride the subways for hours and hours. And what it meant was at 9, 10, 11 years old, I could be literally anywhere in New York City. Back then, the standard was be home by dark. But I could be 20 miles away. And no one would even know where to begin to look for me. 11 years old, I could be in Central Park. I could be at Rockaway. I could just be riding the subway cars from borough to borough for hours. No one would know. We had bus passes which were allowed for subways, but we didn't use them anyway. We chose rather to jump the turnstiles and sneak on to the subway cars. Now, subway cars were connected. And again, I look back in somewhat amazement on the danger that was very present in these conditions. While there were rules that you were not allowed to ride in between the subway cars when the cars were in motion, of course, that's exactly what we did anyway. Which again, imagine that we could have fallen through the subway cars, being killed, and they wouldn't even know it. They wouldn't even know where to begin to look. And of course, there were such tragedies. Well, that was my preteens, and since I didn't enjoy being at home and was finding my way into the streets of New York, again, amazingly, it was at the age of 15 years old that I left and got my own apartment. Again, amazing. It was a different world back then. But I got my own apartment at 15 years old. I was on my own. My first apartment was in a little dump called Clinton Hotel. It was a dive where you had a room, shared bathroom down the hallway. But that was my home, and I was on my own. Clinton Hotel was in Manhattan on around 35th Street, if I recall, which was about a 15-minute walk from 42nd Street. 42nd Street was notorious for being a crime-infested neighborhood. Drugs, prostitutions, all these kinds of things. And now I am hanging out 15, 16, 17 years old at my own apartment, hanging out all night long in the neighborhood of 42nd Street. Well, as I grew up, now I have a son. And so my frame of reference of a father-son dynamic is tied to my story. And so I was one of those who grew up without a dad in a home, without a mentor, without anyone watching me, teaching me how to be a man.
Hey, Don, what do you remember about your father?
Father. He used to have a barbecue every Sunday after church for anybody in the neighborhood. If you didn't go to church, you didn't get any barbecue. Every single day he was in the shop, and every single night he was at the kitchen table with Mia, helping her with her homework. Even after she went to sleep, he'd stay up for a few more hours so he could learn the next chapter and help her the next day. I remember everything about my father. Everything.
That's just it. I don't remember him yelling. I don't remember him smiling. To be honest with you, I don't even remember what he looked like. I don't remember, he's just never there.
You ain't gonna be like that, Brian.
Now, my relationship with my son was a very blessed and good relationship. It would be unusual for a week to go by and not hear from him. We've always had a very deep bonding relationship because I had made up in my mind that I would not be anything like my father. I would not be an absent father. That my son would know who his father is and would have a meaningful role in his life. But my frame of reference was as for stated. I could count the times on one hand that I would run into my father over the years. I'm at the age where I don't even know if he's alive. Given our ages, it's very possible that he's dead. When my mother passed away, he wasn't there. So I actually have no idea where he is or if he's even alive. But I wasn't going to be like that for Jason. I was determined to be a better dad. And because of my story, I would often think, okay, Jason is 9 years old. What was going on with me at 9? Jason is 14 years old. What was I doing when I was 14? It had gotten to a point where I took some personal pride and joy when he got to be 10, 11, and I knew that if I stopped now and never did anything else, I already passed what my father was to me. But as the years unfolded, and I began to think, 17 years old, what was I doing at 17? Now, a deep sense of anxiety would come over me because I knew the things that I was doing at his age. But I was determined to be there, and when Jason came home, they did not furnish me with an owner's manual. I had to figure it out for myself. And of course, I didn't have a good frame of reference. But the determination was there that I was going to be a good dad, that I was going to do everything in my power. I knew that there was nothing that I wouldn't do for my son. As time went on and he began to get older and our distance increased as he went to school in Texas, now I'm hundreds of miles away. I remember at one time where I received a phone call. He was already grown out of the house, must have been about 20, 21. I got a phone call about 2 o'clock in the morning, and it was my son. And he says, "Dad, I'm in trouble. I need help. Please don't be angry." Well, of course, I'm thinking he's in jail. But it turns out that he was being stupid, hanging out with some of his peers, and they were drinking, and one of the kids that he was with, a young person, she had drank herself into a unconscious stupor, and they ended up in the emergency room. Now, it wasn't as bad of an ordeal, it turns out, but imagine you got a group of 20-something-year-olds, and they're in the emergency room, scared, not knowing what happened. Is this person going to die? But I remember how I felt knowing that he felt comfortable and confident calling me. I remember imagining what his peers thought about that. Here they are doing what they know they shouldn't have been doing, scared and not knowing what to do. And Jason says, "I'm going to call my dad." What did they think? Why would you call your dad? I remember imagining how many of them had a dad to call. So it was one of the most poignant memories of my life. And I remember how good I felt knowing that my son had that kind of confidence that he could call me in a time of trouble. It reminded me of the story of the prodigal son, story that we all are familiar with, where a son goes off the tracks, set in his ways, and wants to do things his way, wants to do what he wants to do, when he wants to do it, and how he wants to do it. And he leaves home, and things go downhill from there. He's in a pigsty eating pig's food. And we know the story in Luke 15. And there it reveals when he, the boy, came to his senses, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have food to spare? And here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. How many of us have that kind of a relationship where we feel we can always go back to our father? Dads, are you that kind of man to your children where no matter what, they feel they can always go back to you, that you would be there for them? So now as Jason is off on his own, and I see the kind of world that we are living in, the kind of scary things that are going on in our world. And I found myself at a place having a pride, knowing that I was a good role model for my son, that I was a good dad, that I was a better dad than my dad was ever to me. That in spite of all of that, I come to realize I can't do this on my own. As good of a dad as I believed I was, I realize that I can't be everything to Jason. That there are going to be things that I'm going to miss. That there are limits to my ability to be there for him. And my confidence turns to anxiety. What if I miss something? What if I'm unable to be there? And that's when I came to the realization that as good as a dad I may feel that I am, I need God to complete that package. That I could not be what I need to be without God in my life. And it was not very distressing because I found comfort in knowing that that's exactly what Jesus was telling me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, then you will produce much fruit. Without me, you can't do anything. And those are actually words of comfort, knowing that I don't have to do this alone. That I have a God that will do this with me. I have a God that will do this for me. It was King Asher cried out to the Lord his God, Lord, only you can help the weak against the powerful. Help us, Lord our God, because we rely on you. In our text, Philip, speaking on behalf of all of them, says, Lord, show us the Father, and that will be enough for us. I can't help but to think what prompted that request. Jesus, as long as we have known you, you've always talked about your Father. As long as we've been listening to you, you are always speaking about your Father. You talk about a God who's in control of everything that you identify with as a father. No doubt some of them must have thought like we thought. That isn't anything like my father. I didn't have that kind of a father. But Jesus, every time you speak about a relationship with God as a father that is so profound, so intimate. It would cause us envy. How could anyone be so blessed to have that kind of a relationship with the Father? And Jesus' overall response is clear. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. And what Jesus is saying here is, yeah, my relationship with God, my Father, is astounding. It's wonderful. It's intimate. I can count on it. He's been there for me. But you know, you're asking to see my Father. I don't have to roll back the clouds for that. I don't have to take you to a certain location. What Jesus is saying is that I can be that kind of a father to you. You don't have to look beyond me right now to know the kind of love and the reality of God as your Father. On this Father's Day, no matter what your background is, no matter what your story is, you can know that the God we serve is anxious to be that kind of loving Father to us. Amen. That we, regardless of who was in your life or who was not in your life, we have a God who says, I am your Father. You can count on me. I'll be there for you. I'll never leave you. Oh, hallelujah.
Sing me a song again, Daddy. Sing me a happy verse. Teach me those clever rhymes you sang as you carried me on your shoulders. Sing me that hymn that you so loudly sang in church with Mom.